In this video, I want to talk about how I build products with AI today, what sort of practices I use, what things AI does, what I do, and give you a practical breakdown of how you can also build such products using AI fast. Now, in order to give you some idea of what I am doing these days, I'm primarily working on four things rather. One which you already know, I talk a lot about this. This is the product Monitor YouTube. And this is a product which is also in production right now. You can go ahead, sign up, even pay for this, right? And get paid access. The idea here is that, you can just add a bunch of channels that you want to monitor and you can just keep on monitoring different events that those channels are emitting, right? Super useful for content creators like me to just keep a track on what other people are doing in the space. And this is like a built product. I'm still adding new features, new stuff to it, but you can go ahead and use this. Second product that I'm working on, the name for this is LinkCroc, but this is not online. And I'm going to talk about this once it becomes online, once it is available. So we're going to just probably not talk about this a lot, at least not the idea of what the product is. Third is again like a product which I don't want to give you the name because it's sort of online, right? You can visit the website, but if I tell you that, you would be able to, if I just tell you the name of the product itself, you'll be able to visit it. But I'm just doing some approvals. I'm just waiting for some approvals to happen. Once that happens, then I will launch this product. And fourth is actually a product around RL environments. Now, this is not exactly a product in the sense, it's more of an internal tooling. But this thing that I'm doing right now has a potential to be a startup, a company as well, if things go right. I don't know like how it will go, but I am doing this with a friend and I hope that things go right. And, we end up working with some frontier AI labs for building and giving these RL environments to them. But a lot of this internal tooling, it's not a public facing product. So I will never really announce this on the channel or anywhere on my social media that this is a URL that you can go ahead and use that. But this is a product that I'm sort of like working on tooling wise. So generally in this video, what I want to talk about is what I do as a human and then what I let AI do. So let's say this is complete human, this is complete AI. And this is sometimes human, sometimes AI, this sort of category. Awesome. So first things first, let's start with something that I've been thinking about, that is front-end design. Now in the projects that I do, generally speaking, this is done mostly by AI now. So I'm going to put it in complete AI because obviously there is code review and other stuff that I do, but I'm going to still put this in the complete AI part because those will be different pointers. The next step would be front-end technology, right? What sort of tech that you have to use. And in this case, almost always the whole thing is me. So I would tell that we're going to use React. We're going to use maybe like plain HTML for marketing pages. We're going to use Zustand for, as a store. We're going to use React Query for query library. I would specify everything. So not AI. AI would not tell me the architecture and the tech that the front end would use. I would do that. Exactly on the backend level as well. So for backend tech also, I'm going to be the one who decides what's going to happen, right? So I would tell that we're going to use Node.js, we're going to use TypeScript, we're going to use ESLint, we're going to use, tsconfig of strictest level, we're going to use like a monorepo, we're going to use PNPM, we're going to set minimum release age to like 7 days so that we are not under supply chain attacks. We're going to do like a bunch of these decisions, all of that. That would be done by me, not by AI. And again, database would be primarily done by me. And when I say database, I mean like, again, the tech somewhat, like what sort of schema. Should I use Prisma? Should I use Drizzle? Should I use Keisli? Should I use something else entirely? All of that is done by me, including schema. Let's say schema for DB would be a better choice here because we already have backend tech over here. Now feature writing in most cases is done by AI itself, but the code review is mostly done by me, right? So code review, whether that's on front end and back end, a lot of times what I would say probably is that a lot of times I actually get a smarter AI model to review the code. So I would probably put this one inside sometimes human, sometimes AI. Where let's say if I gave like GPT 5.6 Luna access to the code base and I asked it to write a feature, or even Grok 4.5, then I will have, for example, Sol or Terra or even Opus or Fable to review that code or review the feature overall. But a lot of times I would do the code review myself as well using the diff that I see in the editor. In terms of feature writing, I would probably say that, just to justify this further, that this is mostly completely AI, but refactoring wise, this would also probably go into sometimes human, sometimes AI, right? So if, for example, sometimes I get a lot disturbed by the type of code that even Fable and Sol Ultra write, ultra or high or whatever, medium, whatever intelligence models that you want, because the fundamental architecture and the approach that they take is wrong. And I discussed this in the last video as well. You can see that if you want my sort of like ranking on intelligence and stuff in the previous video. So yeah, sometimes I do the refactoring by hand, just like yesterday I did like 2.5 hours of refactoring, but mostly I get it done through AI. Next is CI push. And this is something that at least on the master branch, I don't let AI do it, right? So on master, at least, this is just me, right? Complete human, not AI, because I want to make sure that the code that is going is at least reviewed in the critical parts. I don't want to, for example, just push something which I have not reviewed at all, not even have taken a glance at it. And while we are talking about everything over here, the reason you're even watching this video is that you want to understand how to do the job in the best possible way so that you earn more. And one way of earning more is to spend less, right? And talking about CI, the best way that you can spend less amount of money is by paying less for the CI. And that is where today's sponsor Warp Build also comes into play. So Warp Build is exactly that instead of using GitHub Actions, you use Warp Build, which provides you 2 times faster CI at a 50% cost. And all you have to do is just change a few lines in your YAML file of GitHub Action and you will be running on Warp Build. No matter what sort of workload you have, whether you require macOS or Windows runners or typical Linux runners, you can use Warp Build for that. In fact, if you want to use your own cloud, you can also bring your own cloud and link your own AWS, GCP, Azure in case you want to use credits or your own billing with Azure. The instances and machines that you see over here are actually much faster and cheaper compared to GitHub Actions and a lot of other players in the space. As a reference, look at this example on the homepage where they mention about how PostHog builds 40 times faster on Warp Build CI compared to GitHub Actions, thanks to the NVMe SSDs and modern CPU architectures and fast boot times of these machines. And as I talk about the next step, which is non-master, where I let even my AI agents keep pushing stuff, I would probably give this sometimes human, sometimes AI. And when my AI goes rogue, I know that the cost will not blow through the roof because I'm already running the best CI runners in the game. So once again, thanks to Warp Build for sponsoring this part of the video. Do check them out. All the links are in the description. And now back to the video. All right. So for generally non-master, I do allow agents to also just push their changes, push their work. So that should be mostly fine. I probably could also move this somewhere here because in case of non-master branches, I generally just say them, just commit all and push all. And they just do that. One thing which is important is the UI review and the app experience. And I'm just writing app X here, but this is app experience. Now, what this fundamentally means is that how the app is getting used in the first place, because all these AI agents are really good at writing code, but what they're super bad at is experiencing the user side of stuff. So this part is exclusively done by me. Even if I'm just spinning up some agents to, do some sort of testing, that would mostly be just for visual verification, that they just want to make sure that, the UI and everything is looking okay. But I would always review the stuff and details generally on my own. Very small examples in general. For example, look at this refresh feed button. I remember in one of the first instances of building Monitor YouTube, when I would click on this disabled state, do you see that? That disabled state was not there. And I could technically just keep on pressing this again and again, even when the button was actually going through the refreshing part. So I have sort of like an eye for these things, right? I don't know, I'm not saying I'm a great UX person or UX developer, but see this, even I think right now it's a little wrong in terms of the skeleton, which is there. I think the skeleton should include these lines as well separately, right? When the skeleton loads up. So these sort of things are very hard for the agent to catch on its own if you just give it a random prompt that go ahead and fix something. So the experience that the end user gets on the app, it's very important that you do it yourself. I agree this. I insist this even for you if you are building apps, but I do this all the time with myself. So this is sort of like a list of what I do, things that I do and who gets to do that. But then a few more things that you should know generally about in the AI space, like working with AI, is first of all like modular code, something that requires your system to be separated out. For example, just to give you an example, one way of writing a backend API is just having a single file api.ts deployed on Cloudflare Worker, right? The other way of writing backend API, considering like Cloudflare Worker as a deployment target, is an API folder. Then you have, let's say admin route over here. We have handler.ts and we have constants.ts. Handler.ts is the actual code which runs when the API is invoked, and constants.ts includes the metadata like request response structure, all of that. And then you have a bunch of more such API endpoints, right? Now the thing is that in second case, it's actually hard because you have to write some sort of glue code, right? You have to write this code in order for it to, you can say this glue code or build code, whatever. I think build code would probably be better for a lot of you guys, but you just sort of like convert this into api.js eventually, which is the same file over here. But the thing is that this sort of structure has to be explicitly told to the agent, and then this explicitly build code which builds this whole thing generates a bunch of files which should be git ignored and then creates the final artifacts, right? Now, the reason I say this is because now it's easier for you to spin up 4 sub-agents, agent 1, agent 2, and 3 and 4, that can just go ahead and work on 4 different APIs parallelly. To give you an example, let's say that you are using Prisma and you suddenly realize that Prisma is actually not that good. I want to shift to Keisli, which is what I use as a stack. If you have a structure like this already, the migration is not very hard and it's also parallelizable, right? You can have a bigger agent like an Opus or something, or even Fable, plan out the migration and ask Fable to dispatch 4 sub-agents, and Fable or Opus would do that, and they will all attack a single API endpoint easily. If you just have it convoluted, like api.ts includes everything, or this architecture is not modular enough, you would actually waste a lot of time because you cannot parallelize your thing over a single API or a single file or something which cannot be parallelized. So this is my first understanding. Second understanding is sub-agents is extremely powerful. A lot of people actually waste a lot of time in Git work trees and branching and doing a bunch of more things, because if you realize this, the reason they waste time into this is because all of these are actually elements that parallelize the output of the agents, right? If you have, let's say, 5 Git work trees checked out, you can have 5 agents running. But the thing is that you can also have that 5 agents running when you are using sub-agents, right? Imagine that you're running Opus 4.8 at, let's say, 30 tokens per second, right? You're deep into a session and it's getting slow and so on. If you are effectively running, let's say, 10 Opus 4.8 on, implementing or refactoring or doing something which can be potentially parallelized, then your effective token rate is 300 tokens per second, even if every single one of them is slow enough, which means that it's much easier for you to parallelize the work than it is to through sub-agents than it is to do through Git work trees, or even just doing custom branching and different tricks and tips. So try to use how you can use sub-agents more. And the thing is that sub-agents themselves don't have to do anything which is completely related. You can have one sub-agent, for example, doing API creation. Second sub-agent could be just doing a debugging of some other issue, right? And so on and so forth. Third, but a very important point, is figure out the right AI. And I can't emphasize this enough because, if you use, for example, something like Grok 4.5 for implementing something that you even don't know, then this is a bad agent. Don't use this for implementing something which is complex or which is something that requires, an initial knowledge. Like 4.5 should not be the one creating plans for you. Who should be creating plans is 5.6 Sol, Fable, or maybe even Opus 4.8 on extra high, maybe. And then you can hand over the work to 4.5 in sub-agents form. And this, by the way, does include like sort of implementing feature designs or, even feature writing in a way, because I've seen a lot of times that 4.5 actually ends up making mistakes. And it's not just about 4.5. This is the same category for Sonnet 5. I would probably put like Kimi K2.7 sort of models as well in this same bucket. GLM 5.2 is also sort of in the similar bucket, right? So I would not probably ask it to create a plan. It's a good enough executor, sure, but not without a plan created by a frontier model of categories that now we have. But yeah, so for all of these tasks that you see over here, not every model is a right fit. So you have to figure out by working, and you will see that the more you work, the more token maxing you do, the better you would get at how the model is getting steered, and the better you will be able to pick the next model for the task. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully these pointers helped you a little bit. I did talk about a little bit about Cloudflare workers and deployment targets as well. Do let me know in the comments if you want me to give you a breakdown of how to actually deploy code in production style end to end using AI as well, like what sort of services and stuff that you can use. But yeah, that's all for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna see you in the next video very soon. If you're still watching, make sure you leave a comment, "I watched till the end" below to tell me that you were still here, and let me know what do you think about the video.